In the 1730s, throughout many areas in the New England colonies, revivals, or awakenings as they were called, were beginning to break out, due in large part to pastors such as Jonathan Edwards, who saw the need to address the undisciplined acts of many people in the community. As Edwards began to preach against the social permissiveness of the youth of his day, and in the need for the discipline of the Word of God, many were saved and began to turn from such things as night walking and frolicking. As a result, not only did the revival come to the young people, it also brought about revival to their parents as well, who began to understand the need to bring discipline in the Word of God to their children. These awakenings soon swept through the colonies and brought not only revival, but unfortunately also brought criticism from those who viewed these events as being too emotional and dangerous for the religious piety of the church. Jonathan Edwards was quick to realize the spiritual significance of these awakenings. In his letter to the Reverend Benjamin Coleman, stated a faithful narrative of surprising work of God, Edwards gave detail to some of the events when he stated this, quote, "Many of them say the Bible seems to be a new book to them, as though they have never read it before. There have been some instances of persons that, by only an accidental sight of the Bible, have been much moved, it seemed to me, as a lover by the sight of his sweetheart." End quote. Reports such as this provide insight into the beginning of what was soon to be known as the Great Awakening. Once these reports began to be published, even as far away as England, it was only a matter of time and a few weeks' journey across the ocean before a young itinerant preacher named George Whitefield returned to the colonies to be involved in a work that would have a profound effect on colonial America. In his book, Jonathan Edwards, A Life, George Marsden states, quote, "Whitefield's tour was a truly international phenomenon. It was also the first intercolonial cultural event, the beginning of a common American cultural identity," end quote. This popular young evangelist, preaching to huge crowds and inciting emotional responses rarely seen throughout the colonies, was about to shake the very foundation of spiritual life in America. Even though the awakenings were transforming lives throughout the colonies, there were still detractors who believed that the manifestations of emotion were unnecessary and somewhat evil. In an article titled "The Great Awakening in Virginia," author T.S. Kidd states, quote, "By 1745, Virginia Lieutenant Governor Sir William Gooch had begun to call for the suppression of illicit ministers under the pretended influence of new light, extraordinary impulse, and such like fanatical and enthusiastic knowledge. They were a threat to the stability of the colony, he believed, and might lead common people into wild delusions." End quote. Religious leaders who were caught up in opposition to the revivals, such as Reverend Charles Chauncey, a popular Anglican pastor in Boston, stated the following about the revivals, quote, "'Tis generally believed Satan has been very busy in these times. He has, no doubt, had a great hand in fomenting the divisions and promoting the extravagancies which have of late been so detrimental to the interest of religion." End quote. These criticisms from both the political and religious establishment created a great divide between the old light religious order and the new light movement sweeping the country, and further cemented the alliances of both orders.